How's it going, everyone? Shiny Plume here.
I went to my first locals in probably over a month, and I decided to bring my favorite deck. That, of course, being Rikka mid-range. Now, the reason I like this deck so much is, well, I've always liked the plant deck, but, you know, I've seen a lot of different deck profiles that play, the Sun Avalons and the Ragnaraikas, and the ceiling for plants is, well, absurd. But it was never the way I wanted to play the deck.
So keep in mind with this deck list, this is not going to be considered the best way to play plants. This is not going to be the highest ceiling way to play plants, at least. This is just the way that I like to play plants. But in either case, let's actually get into the deck profile because there's a lot to cover. So we're going to start off with the aroma cards because in the main I only played 4 of them. So 3 Rosalina and 1 Arrowmage Laurel. This is the minimum that you need to be basically playing if you want to play aromas. And I didn't really use aromas as an actual strategy, just more as extenders than anything, and starters. So what it does is, on summon with Romaloth Rosalina, you summon Arrowmage Laurel from the deck, and then you link both of these off to make a Jasmine, and Laurel gains 500 life points. So you activate the mandatory effect of Jasmine to search for any plant monster. So now let's get into the actual Rikkas, which is the big part of the deck. We got 3 Rikka Petal, which is one of the best starters in this deck. During the main phase, you can add any Rikka monster to your hand, or you could send it to graveyard if you wanted to. And during your opponent's end phase, Petal goes back. Then we got one of the best extenders in the deck, 3 Rikka Princess. This is a free summon if it's in your hand, and it also is a monster negate. So if your opponent activates a monster effect, you can shuffle this back from your hand or graveyard and tribute 1 plant monster to negate that effect. We'll get into the field spell in a little bit, but that's really what elevates this card to be one of the best cards in the deck. Then we got 1 Primula, which is another extender. So when you're playing a heavier Rikka package, you usually want to search both Primula and Princess with Glamour. And the reason why you want to do that is because the main extra deck monster you want to summon is Rikka Queen Strenna. And Primula plus Princess is the most efficient way to do that. Because the other ways you'd make it are with Snowdrop to level modulate or with Dance Peon to level modulate, and in either case, both I find are very inefficient. So while this card is not necessary in more plant piles or in other builds of the deck, the main thing about Rikkas is that you want to be ending on Strenna, so you want more efficient ways to make it. Then we got 3 copies of Mudan, the Rikka Fairy. This card is also a fantastic extender. So you can tribute a plant monster you control to summon it, and then it searches for any Rikka spell or trap, which 9 times out of 10 is going to be the field spell. That's just the way it is. But I mean, if you already have the field spell, that means you can search Glamour or the trap cards. In this build, we'll get into the trap cards that I play. Then we got 2 copies of Snowdrop. Now, in a more Rikka heavy build, you want to be playing 2 of this. And the reason why is because you don't mind seeing this in your hand. It's actually a fantastic extender to see in your hand because you have this and one other plant monster in your hand, you just summon both. And also in my particular build, I am playing a couple more level 8s than I probably should have. Now on to the generic plant monsters. We got 2 Rose Lover, which this one is very interesting in this deck. So what it does is, it doesn't really do anything on the field, but if it's in your graveyard, you can banish it to special summon any plant monster from your hand, and that monster you summon is unaffected by trap cards. It's really easy to get this card into graveyard with the Sun Avalon Dryas, which we'll get into. Next, we got 1 Rose Girl. Now, this usually might be out of place in a deck like this, but this is a free extender. If you a plant monster sent to graveyard, you can special summon this. It's a level 3 tuner, and we are playing a synchro on this deck, so we'll get into that when we get into the extra deck. Then we got one of the OGs, one of the best plant cards ever printed, 3 copies of Lone Fire Blossom. And this one usually won me a lot of games in a grind game because it's just like, okay, well, my board got cleared, but my opponent's field isn't very impressive either. So normal summon Lone Fire, go full combo. Anyway, we got 1 copy of Lily Borea, as I was stating earlier. Now, I'm not playing the full Ethereum package. I'm playing this as just a level 8 extender. And it's usually the thing I would search off of Jasmine to keep extending and go into the Rikka plays if I started with Aroma. Then we got 1 copy of my favorite card in the game, Titanial, Princess of Camellias. This card is still pretty good, even today. And what it does is, if your opponent, or I guess either player technically, targets a card on the field, you can choose a plant monster you control to negate the activation and destroy the card. That effect is not once per turn, not once per chain. This is back when those did not exist. So this is a really good answer to things like Sky Striker and SP Little Knight. And basically a lot of effects that would just target. It's very good. And it's searchable in this deck. You could search it with Jasmine, you can search it with Glamour alongside a Snowdrop and summon it. But also it's just my favorite card in the deck. This is just a pet card of mine and part of the reason I built this deck the way I did. And then finally, the last plant monster is 1 Mardell, Generator Boss of Light. This is another pet card of mine. And on summon it searches any plant. So it's really good as part of the combo piece and also as an extender. And also a great recovery tool if you get this out of the graveyard, which I'll get into that. Now we get to the spell cards. I'm going to start off with 3 Rikka Glamour. Glamour is fantastic in this deck. It just searches any Rikka monster, but if you tribute a plant monster, you can search for a Rikka monster and 1 other plant monster, but they have to be the same level. So you can get Primula and Princess, or you get Petal and Rosalina, or you can get Snowdrop and Titanial or Snowdrop and Lily Borea. It's a very versatile card. Now we get into one of the best cards in the deck, in fact, the best card in the deck, the field spell, Rikka Con. To say this card is carrying this deck is probably an understatement. This card is insanity. It can, if you control a Rikka monster, you can set any Rikka spell trap from your deck. So if you don't have it yet, it could be the Glamour. But also the main thing is that if you would tribute a plant monster to activate a Rikka card or effect, you can tribute a monster your opponent controls instead. Now, this is insane in this deck because it substitutes Rikka Glamour's Tribute a Plant Monster effect, or Mudan's Tribute a Plant Monster effect, or Princess's Tribute a Plant Monster effect, or Snowdrop's Tribute a Plant Monster effect for a monster your opponent controls. So you out one of your opponent's monsters, basically for free because it tributes for cost, and you get benefits off of it. And then for the rest of the engine, 1 copy of 1-for-1 because this gets you any of your starters. And finally, the trap card I played, 1 Rikka Tranquility. Now, this might be a controversial pick, and the reason for that is because a lot of people are like, well, why don't you just play Rikka Sheet? Well, in much more, I guess, plant pile versions, I really do understand the utility of Rikka Sheet. But I feel like people underestimate Rikka Tranquility massively. So what it does is that it can summon a Rikka monster from your graveyard, but if you tribute a plant monster, you can, or your opponent's monster if you have the field spell, you can summon a Rikka monster and 1 other plant monster from your graveyard in defense position. Tranquility, I find, is just way better at grind games because it gets you a bunch of recovery, especially if you have like something like Mardell in your graveyard. And it also is a little bit more versatile than Rikka Sheet because well, it plays better under things like Harpy's Feather Duster, Lightning Storm, and Evenly Matched. Because when your opponent is going to start with one of those cards, they out your back row, even if you have Ricochet set. So it's just going to instantly destroy most of your plays. However, if you have Tranquility set, you can just activate it in response. So you get back to monsters either way. And the other thing too is that, well, it makes sure you don't lose to Evenly Matched, because what you can do is you can, if your opponent activates Evenly Matched, you can change Tranquility, tribute like your Strenna that you have on board, and then summon 2 monsters that you really don't care if they get banished. Then banish everything except for the field spell, and then you use Strenna's effect to summon a monster with a higher rank. Therefore, you can keep your field spell and a monster on board for your Princess Negate. So that's part of the reasons why I picked Tranquility over Sheet. I just prefer it more in this version of the deck than I would in a plant pile deck. And people underestimate this card, so it's really good. Now for the non-engine I played 3 Infinite Impermanence, 3 Triple Tactics Talent, 3 Ghost Spell, and 3 Droll and Lockbird. I think that of all of these, I probably would cut Droll and Lockbird, but Droll and Lockbird is still pretty good, especially against Raziel. Like, I've heard people say, well, Raziel doesn't lose to Droll. Yeah, but they don't prefer to play under it either. As for Ghost Spell, I just really like Ghost Spell. I think Ghost Spell is pretty good this format. I mean, it's really good against certain matchups, especially against like Fiendsmith. And I just like it better than Ash Blossom, personally. That's just a personal opinion. That's why I played it. Triple Tactics Talent is probably my favorite staple, and I'm glad to be playing this at 3. I used to be adamant about playing 2, but in this format, I feel like it's better to play 3 anyway. And then Infinite Impermanence, I always go back and forth on this card. It's not bad. I think it's perfectly fine, especially if you pair it with a Droll and Lockbird, because then they just set up like a board under Droll, and then you just imperm whatever they set up. So yeah, it's very good in that regard. Now for the extra deck, let's start with the Link monsters. So we're gonna start off with the Link monsters. We got 1 Sinavalon Dryas and 1 Healer. I've talked about the niche play you can do with Dryas and Healer before, but the reason I'm mostly playing Dryas in this deck is to get a monster into the graveyard. So like say Rose Lover, and that's mainly it. That's all it really is there for. Then we got 2 Dance Peon. This is the Hail Mary of the deck usually, but also it is something to summon instead of Jasmine. So, and it's also the way to play around Droll and Lockbird and occasionally Shifter. Then got 2 copies of the best plant link ever, Almost Every Jasmine. If you gain life points, you search a plant, you can choose a plant monster it points to, or even just any monster it points to summon a plant monster from your deck. And it also makes the monsters that it points to and itself, if you're at higher life points, unable to be destroyed by battle. Then we got 1 copy of Rosemary. This searches an aroma on special summon even, and if you tribute a monster it points to, you can target a card your opponent controls and banish it, then gain 1,000 life points. So this is like the tried and true way to out back row in this deck, because let's be honest, when you're playing plants, that's the main thing you're worried about is back row. Because there's not a lot of outs to it, at least not a lot of efficient outs to it. Then for the Synchro I was talking about, 1 Perialis. Now this is another pet card of mine. I like this card a lot. You can make this usually with a Rose Girl and possibly like a Primula or a Princess. And what it does is that it gains 400 attack for every plant you control. And you can, once per turn, summon a level 5 or higher plant from your hand or graveyard in defense position. This is really good in grind games, and unbricking a hand, usually if you have like Mardell in your hand, or you can summon Mardell from your graveyard if you wanted to. Now for the XYZs, we got the best XYZs in the deck, the most versatile one, 3 Strenna. So you can detach material and target a plant monster or wreck a card in your graveyard and add it back to your hand. And if it's tributed, then you can summon a plant XYZ with a higher rank and attach this as material. And this is usually one of the end board pieces that you're making in this deck. Usually the end board consists of Strenna, Field Spell, possibly Jasmine, and then Set Tranquility. And you have Princess in your graveyard for a monster negate, Tranquility for follow-up and for recovery, Petal in your graveyard for also the same thing, and then Strenna just summons one of your plant XCs that you want to summon, in which there are 4 targets for it in this version of the deck. We got Kanzashi to go for OTK and also protect from destruction. Oria the Sylvan High Arbiter for outing a lot of cards, because what it can do is you can send a plant from your hand or field to the graveyard, then stack the top of your deck equal to that monster's level, and then you detach a material from this card, activate the top 3 cards. Every plant monster activated that way goes to grave, and for every plant that goes to grave, you return a card on the field back to the hand, and it does not target. So this is just a good way to clear a board for an OTK. Then we got 1 Teardrop the Rikka Queen, probably the best one to summon, because you can quick effect target a monster and tribute it, and it gains 200 attack for every monster tributed until the end of the turn. And it's just one of the best end board pieces for me personally. And the last one is Sacred Tree Beast. This one is a negate depending on what it has as material, which 9 times out of 10 would be a Strenna, so it would be a monster negate. But you can also attach things from your graveyard, like a spell or a trap, when you activate a spell or a trap, and attach it as material. So if you activate a spell, you can get a spell as a material, therefore you have a spell negate on your opponent's turn, and same with a trap. But I find myself not summoning this very often. It is a negate, yes, but like, you already have Princess, so having an extra negate is sometimes redundant. I mean, it's not bad. It's not bad. It's just like 9 times out of 10, I'd rather summon Teardrop. Now for the side deck. Got 1 Cherry Rose Whip. No matter what, this is a card that I'll always have in my side deck, no matter what plant deck I'm playing. So what it does is your opponent can only activate 1 spell or trap per turn. It's a very simple effect, but it's a very simple floodgate effect. So when you're going first, in usually like games 2 or 3, you'd summon this, and then you lock your opponent only into 1 spell or trap. I feel like if you're playing plants, even if there's not a lot of back row heavy decks at like whatever your local level is, or at the competitive level even, you still have to respect back row, because you don't want to lose to it. And that's kind of my philosophy with playing cards like that. That being said, I also play the 1 Harpy's Feather Duster for that exact same reason, to out back row, and then 2 Triple Tactics Thrust to search something like a Duster. And then the other spell cards I played 3 Ultimate Slayer. I didn't really see this or Thrust either, but the reason I play this is because, well, my entire deck is, you know, Xyz, a Synchro, and Lynx. So these, I can send one of these for a Ryziel matchup. I could send this for a Centurion matchup, and I could send one of these for a Mouse matchup. That's kind of the reason I'm playing Ultimate Slayer. It's just a pretty good card, this format. I have, unfortunately, not really used it yet, but yeah, it's still pretty good. 2 Dark Ruler. I'm always going to be playing Dark Ruler. This is how I won one of my Centurion matchups, because they set up their board with Cosmic Blazar Dragon. I'm like, okay, just Dark Ruler everything, play. And then 2 Evenly Matched, 1 D-Barrier, and finally 3 Polynosis, because I think that people really like Solemn Judgment this format, and I understand it, but I don't really like paying the half-life points to do it, because then I just lose harder if they have more extenders. But Polynosis tributes a plant monster instead of paying half your life points. And that's it for this Rikka deck profile. During the end phase, Pedal goes back. Thank you all for watching. Peace.